Good morning, everyone. Today we are talking about Oscar Wilde, born in Dublin in 1854. But before talking about that, I would like to tell you something about the aesthetic movement that you can find in your book at page 211. This movement was introduced in France for the first time by Théophile Gautier, and this movement was born from three main elements. First of all, the frustration of the artist. Secondly, the reaction against the moral values, the moral codes of the bourgeoisie that in Britain corresponded to the middle class, and the need to redefine a new role for the artist. This movement was exported in Britain, in England in particular, by the American painter Whistler, and but the true theorist of the movement in England was Walter Pater. First of all, Walter Pater talked about the art as the only way to stop time, the only way to make a person or something immortal. He also introduced the concept of art for art's sake. That means that art has no other purpose than itself, and the pleasure that it gives to the artist himself. And also he introduced the concept according to which life should be, in the same spirit of art, a work of art, a masterpiece, where every kind of pleasure has to be lived. And so art should be devoid of any moral or didactic purpose, and should be detached from reality. Well, Oscar Wilde was a disciple of Walter Pater. That is the reason of my introduction of today. So he was born in Dublin in 1854, and he was a disciple of Walter Pater and of aestheticism. It was since the times of he attended the Trinity College in Dublin, and then studied at Oxford. And since the times of his studies and of his university, he was considered foppish and eccentric. But foppish means eccentrico, and he was such both in his behavior, but especially in his style, in the kind of clothes that he wore. He married with Constance Lloyd, that bore him 2 children. But when he had already the 2 children, he realized to be much more interested in men than in women, and especially to boys. And so he acted what we today would call the coming out. That was very, very difficult by that time, much more than it is today, if you consider the atmosphere and the background of the Victorian age, based on very strict moral codes. He had an affair with, among the other boys, he also had an affair with Lord Alfred Douglas, and because of that, Alfred's father forced him a trial, and forced a trial against him, and he was condemned to 2 years forced labor that completely destroyed him, not only physically but also psychologically and morally. The pictures that you will see in these slides refer to the movie produced in 1997 by Brian Gilbert. And they deal with his life in detail. In his life, he started his literary career with short stories, The Canterville Ghost, The Happy Prince, and other tales. There was sort of fables that he produced, that he wrote for his children. He was a very good father for his children. And then in 1891, he wrote The Picture of Dorian Gray, that had to remain the only novel that he wrote in his career, but it became very famous, especially for the scandal that it created by that time, because it was considered immoral. And also he dedicated to the theater, and he wrote some plays such as The Importance of Being Earnest, Lady Windermere's Fan, and also Salome, that was his last play that scandalized the public of the time, and that was not allowed to be performed in London theaters. As I have told you first, he was a professor of aesthetics. He also went, when he went to America, he took some lessons about aestheticism. In his lesson, he said that music, poetry, theater, and so on were only different kinds of art, were only different kinds of the same truth. He accepted the concept of art for art's sake that had been introduced by Walter Pater, and but that became not only an aesthetic imperative but also a moral one, because as Pater had said, it was important that life was lived as a work of art, as a masterpiece, and it was exactly what he did. He is considered a dandy, an aristocratic mind who demands freedom. Dandy was a different figure if compared to the Bohemian. We have talked about the Bohemian when we have talked about Stevenson. Stevenson was a person, Bohemian was a person coming from a quite high social class, but that decided to split from his social class to go to live with the proletarians and to see, to know them and to understand their problems and their reasons. The dandy is a person, on the contrary, is a person who keeps his own privileges, the privileges of his social class, but he's an aristocratic mind. And being an aristocratic mind, being a sort of a genius, he demands complete freedom, and he can't respect the values, the moral codes of the time. So what he makes in his works and in his life is to challenge the Victorian respectability. Life, according to him, is meant for pleasure, and is going to live all the kinds of pleasure, to look for beauty. And for him, what was beautiful was beautiful clothes. What gave him pleasure were clothes, good food, and handsome guys. Art was in all its forms the cult and search for beauty. So poetry, music, theater, were all forms of art, and all had as the only purpose the search for beauty. Art didn't have any moral purpose. There wasn't such a thing like a moral book or an immoral book, he said. There were only well written and badly written books. And so he was a superior being destined to become an outcast, and he was very conscious of that. It was the cost to be paid for his superiority, for his being an aristocratic mind, a genius. And in fact, he faced all the consequences of his being a genius and of all his being an unconventional person. When he acted what we today call coming out, he had to face the consequences. He had to face prison. The Picture of Dorian Gray is the only novel that he wrote, and in brief, the protagonist, Dorian Gray, makes a deal with the devil to get to be young forever. And so he transfers the signs of the passing of time and of his bad actions in the picture. This is an allegorical story, the story of a man who sells his soul to the devil, that we have already found in the Faustus by Christopher Marlowe, contemporary of Shakespeare. It is again the reproduction of the myth of Prometheus. Prometheus, as I have already told you many times, was the semigod that wrote about fire to men, that challenged the gods. He was the overreacher, and the myth that the overreacher is often presented in the novels of the Romantic Age, and especially during the Victorian Age. Another theme is the double. The picture, the painting, is the bad conscience of the Victorian middle class, and the fact that in the end Dorian can't stand the ugly picture any longer, because it is the picture of his bad conscience, and stabs at it. By doing that, he stabs himself, shows that art is eternal, because the picture goes back to its own beauty, original beauty. Art, as Walter Pater said, is the only way to stop time. And the moral of the story is that every excess must be punished, and reality cannot be escaped. That's all for today. Bye, guys.